What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Team Kitchen Fable video. I'm Jacob, and I'm joined by our newest teammate, Patrick Weiss. So he had a super great run at Pro Tour. He placed 50th, and it was as good as a time of any to invite him. He's been playing with us for a while. He's been friends with the team for a while, and he's got a pretty awesome Prism deck that he's going to take us through today. So if you have anything else to introduce yourself, go for it, or we can just hop into the deck.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been playing since Monarch first released. I got really interested in the game after the professor's video came out on this thing called Flesh and Blood, and I was instantly hooked. Bought some boxes off eBay and pulled a mask of momentum, and I was just done for. So
Nice.
yeah. And so I bought into the FOMO like instantly on Monarch. I was like, I need to get my hands on product, and I just fell in love with the Prism as a character, the light motif, and I have played her ever since. I think there's only like one competitive event that I haven't run Prism in that in which she was able to be run. Totally
Wow.
regretted it. And so I am back on Prism for until she gets Living Legend. So
That is
um,
dedication, I have to say. I feel
y-
like I started out playing a lot of Bravo Showstopper, but since then I kind of flip flop around often. But
yeah,
you've got it nailed down with Prism, it sounds like. So I'm excited to hear
yeah,
your thoughts on the deck.
awesome. So um, as far as the character for equipment, just the standard tunic suite right now
For
is
sure.
just it has a more consistent plan defensively and offensively than Vestige and Tome of Divinity do at this point in time. Um, Even though you could say that the ceiling is higher on the Tome of Divinity plan, and you can try and high roll with off the top of the deck, but the more consistent way to play that strategy is to pitch stack and load up a 3-tome turn with
Yeah.
a blue and a trigger on Vestige. That's just not feasible right now because it's very difficult to get to the second cycle of your deck.
Yeah.
Um, so that's out of contention for me at least while I'm running it. Tunic is just great. Luminar's obviously the weapon of choice for Prism, not even close.
Definitely.
Um, some sideboard tech with Crown of Reflection. It is only used in the mirror against Prism. I guess it also is AB1 against Kano, but that
Yeah.
didn't come up for me in event.
There were Kanos
Um,
running around, but
Yeah,
it's good.
luckily I didn't see any because
Yeah.
I was greedy and was only running AB1, which you'll see here in a second. Tunic, again, is just so consistent. Has a lot of little niche cases where you can use the one resource. I'll get into a big line of play with this card over here. But yeah, it's just a fantastic piece of equipment. There's a reason why most characters run this card.
Yeah. I have to
Um,
say, off topic, the reflection on the tunic looks like really good in this lighting.
Sweet. I have a desk lamp that I got, so glad it's out. Um,
Yeah.
a card that you probably haven't seen a whole lot of recently in Prism, with Goliath Gauntlet.
Hmm.
So this would either be Goliath Gauntlet in my list, or in most lists would be Null Rune Gloves.
Hmm.
It is run against aggro decks, so Chane, Katsu, Lexi, Lightning Lexi, anything that you want to get over the top and push damage on a Herald. This is the card for you, because most decks aren't running more than 5 or 6 poppers at this point, if even that. So this is the card to use for aggression.
Yeah, it seems very high risk, high reward, but if you can kind of guarantee that your opponent doesn't have a popper in hand, that extra 2 damage combined with all the relevant on hit effects on your herald seems pretty value.
Yep, and if you can keep count of the number of poppers you've seen and like kind of give a good estimate when to use it, it can
Hmm.
it can pay off huge. And it's very good against Chain. with Husk, getting over the top of Husk if they haven't saved any of their other equipment, or forcing a double equipment block so that you can come in with a key sideboard card. It's very good. So
Nice.
next piece, Ironhide Gauntlet. It's proven to be much more valuable in the meta than Dreamweavers. That would be the other card in this slot. Its particular use cases are for the mirror against Prism, specifically saves until an erudition, and also in the Starvo matchup to try and mitigate one turn of their on-hit effects with Crippling Crush or Oakenold. Or
Yeah.
if you need to block out Hammer and only have blues to stop a Frostbite on a key turn, it's just been very good because you can pitch a blue, block with this, create a shield, or pitch a blue, block with this, block with boots, and it's just a fantastic piece of equipment. Prism.
Definitely agree.
Skullcap is a given in this meta. Obviously, in Vestige, you'd be running Halo for the on-demand Vestige trigger. But currently, the 3 life to be able to block against Starvo, Katsu, Chane, any relevant on-hit effects, or even just save some life is very good. So that's obviously just like Tunic. There's a reason why most characters run this piece of equipment.
Yeah, for sure.
And I flexed and ran a dull cap in the Pro Tour, even though I have a rainbow foil, so it was
Nice.
great. And then finally, the key piece of equipment for Prism, it unlocks her entire aggro strategy, Phantasmal Footsteps, obviously the ability to buy back your action point after a herald has been destroyed through the trigger of Phantasm is very important for Prism. And you'll find that Starvos tend to try and blow this up with Expose the elements
Mm,
frequently, even though, in my opinion, their correct target would be Tunic, because the value you get off of Tunic.
yep.
However, most of them will incorrectly, in my opinion, again, blow this one up instead. Just because it then makes it awkward to work through action points. They pop your Herald, you're not able to buy it back your action point and threaten your shields. So you get into this point where you have to have Soul in order to pitch a yellow, be able to get go again on your attacks. But you can still work through that, and I've had
Yeah.
Starvos blow up this like as early as turn like 2 or 3, and still I'm just able to get through because of the value of Tunic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's
still
such
a very good card.
yeah, the aura strategy in Prism is so strong that if you just kind of change your play pattern, if you lose access to the footsteps, I think you're still gaming for sure. So if there's any Starvo players out there that are trying to get info on the enemy, you heard it here first. You got to kill the tunic, not the footsteps. Unless it's like maybe the end of the game and there's only a couple turns left.
Yep, early game, the correct choice is Tunic.
Yeah.
Mid to late game, like maybe Boots if you're in a commanding lead, but for the most part, Tunic.
Yeah, for sure.
So with the deck, obviously there's a lot of yellows. There's a couple of key choices that I've made in this layout. We'll just work our way up. So in the Tunic build, we're obviously running a lot of auras, and in
Hmm.
my list particularly, I think I'm running 27. I'm running, and so for the blues, I'm running all of the blues available to us from Everfest. Shimmers of Silver, 3 of. Haze Bending, 3 of. Pierce Reality, 3 of. Passing Mirage, 3 of. These are all very good tools, and the synergy that they give to the deck, as well as the distraction that they provide with creating a board state, is just incredible.
Yeah.
In most matchups, I'm running all of the blues. Some matchups, I'm taking a couple out, but for the most part, running all of them.
Nice.
Then we're just running the 2 most valuable blue heralds, blue War Tune, credible because it's a 1 for 5 go again, block 3, and Herald of Protection, just that on hit to get an additional 2 points of life, or 2-point life swing with a shield is very good. So a lot of other lists are running blue Rebirth, and it's a good card to threaten the on hit, but it just never hits. So
Yeah.
I just to threaten back, bringing back an air edition. They're never going to let it hit. So I'm running these.
So another choice is the number of blues. I think you have, what is this, 18 blues?
Yep,
All
18
four
blues.
sets of auras and then six more.
Yep,
The original tunic lists were like as high as 24, like 21 to
21.
24.
Yep,
So one of the sacrifices it looks like you made is taking out like at least three blues.
yep. 3 blue rebirths would be, it would put me at 21. And the reason the blue count is so high is for a key card that isn't in my list, that is in most other Prism lists, which is the Arclight Sentinel.
Mm,
It's kind of pivotal to have that many blues to be able to facilitate playing Arclight when you need to.
yeah.
And I kind of pulled an Alexander Hamilton with his Awakening, where most of my opponents had to play around me having Arclight Sentinel, even though I wasn't running Arclight Sentinel Pro Tour.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
so it was very good, and it came in handy day 2, round 1 against my chain opponent who played a time skippers, and I just chuckled to myself because I did not have any Arclight Sentinel in my deck. And yeah, it ended up being huge because he couldn't play as efficiently as he could have had with creepers, and ultimately it was a very good game for me. So
Yeah, I have to say, as someone who's also played Prism, cutting Arclight is like very scary, actually, in my opinion. But that line of reasoning, considering the metagame that we're looking at right now, where Arclight might not be, I think it's probably uh, less useful against the casino Starvos because they have so much built-in go again, and like you're going to take a lot of damage to try to get an arc light down probably.
yep.
And chains that have such a good built-in, not built-in, but they're bringing the time skippers now, like almost all the chains are bringing time skippers, you just nullify that boot piece. I think that's a really heads up decision to cut the arc light from the list.
So, and especially at the Pro Tour, there the level of chain player is above average, and so good chains will not let you get the value off of Arclight Sentinel, and
Yeah.
so I just find that in chain you want to be aggressive and to race him again because of the decisions I'm making with what I'm running in my sideboard outside my core.
Hmm.
Um, I wasn't like trying to rely upon the gotcha aspect with Arclight with his blood debt on 6 or 7 shackles.
Yeah.
Um, and so however, it is a meta call. If you are expecting Saber's Control or the Yuki list, the Yuki, 3 of a kind, go crazy list with
Yeah.
Lexi, those are decks that definitely fold to Arclight Sentinel on
Hmm.
on their key pivotal turns. So, dependent upon your meta, if you're seeing those combo decks, you may want, or you will want, the Arclight Sentinel in your 80.
Yeah, that's a really good call out.
Um, okay, so then, so in the yellow slot, we don't have the Arclight Sentinels. We have the rest of the key auras, Parable, or all of them, Ode, Merciful, Genesis, all of them good in their own right, and
Hmm.
just extremely valuable cards. Even though they block 0, they're just the ability, especially in Starvo, to mitigate their on-hit effects with Oakenold and Crippling Crush. Everybody knows how good it is to sacrifice that life total for board state.
Yeah.
It's just great. Then obviously 3 Soul Shield, just one of the best cards in the deck against most. Um, I did not run it into chain. It comes out against chain because we're racing and we want to be able to damage them.
Yeah.
So that is like the one matchup I'm taking them out. Every other matchup it stays in. Um,
Yeah, the soul shield against chain is very interesting. If you don't mind, because I think bringing soul shield against chain sometimes can be good as just it can be an above rate blocker. but also fuel your soul for Celestial Cataclysm. But halfway through my sentence, I remembered you're not running any null rune against Chain. So then again, it's just a 3 block for or 3 block per card on 2 cards. So I metagamed myself halfway through my sentence. But if anyone's running null rune, I think you can consider maybe running Soul Shield. But if you're
Yep.
racing, then again, probably okay to cut.
Yep. Yeah, I fall into that trap all the time just because it is such a valuable card.
Mhm.
Uh, Soul, yeah, it just it's a little clunky when you want to be attacking and you draw into a defensive reaction, right? So,
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
I am literally not blocking against Chain unless it is like and if I am blocking, I probably have lost.
Yeah.
Uh, so. Um, okay, so as far as Heralds, we're running the 3 yellow War Tune, best card in the deck. Herald of Triumph yellow. This is a great card against all the aggro decks, sideboarding 6s in against you. It's, yeah, good way to poke in and get through their poppers. Usually on the
Definitely.
back end of a chain, I like to lead with War Tune and end with Triumph because you get your value. They're like, aha, oh, you're coming with a War Tune. Well, maybe it's an air edition coming. Well,
Yeah.
if it's a Herald of Triumph, then you're just getting value.
Yeah, these are the
Um,
type of mind games that I think prisms really benefit from learning. Like even in the middle of the game, if you figure out your opponent actually has a tendency to pop the first herald, then you can even change your play up. But I think there's a lot of room for play like that. Maybe leading with a weaker one and ending with a more powerful one, or if they just start popping the second one, just lead with the powerful one, and then they save their popper for like a blue war tune, or like you said, a Herald of Triumph. So stuff
yep.
like that is really key for piloting Prism.
Followed up by Protection, a great card. Obviously, again, just like the blue. Judgment. Judgments I find to be just average. Usually these
Mhm.
soak husk. However, like if you ever get like the odd case that you do go late with chain, which in this build you're not going to, but the on hit effect actually works against Urser. So if you attack Urser with this, it will trigger because on hits trigger against allies. So that's a cool niche thing to know about Herald of Judgment into chain.
Hmm.
Um, and then Herald of Erudition. I said that Wartune was the best card in the deck. This is probably the second best card in the deck, just because it rarely hits because people do not want it to hit.
Yeah,
It is very bad for them if it hits. Getting 2 extra cards and getting Soul, it is just a great card and everybody knows it so far. So.
definitely.
And then my favorite. Okay, so um, we'll go over Enigma Chimera Yellow first. So these are the last yellows in the core of the deck beyond our spicy next card. So it is a good card. It's vanilla 7 for 2, block 3, Phantasm. The other card that can be run in this slot is Coalescence Mirage.
Yeah,
I liked this because it was a 7 cost that can pay for itself if you draw 2 of them. This is why it's not a like a red protection, which is also a 7 attack. Um, so I value this higher than red protection with this setup because I'm running fractals in the sideboard.
yeah,
I wanted 2 extra cards that um, are able to be copied by not going to soul, and the synergy being yellow, it fits a lot of the things I want in this slot. So either this or Coalescence Mirage um, would be fine.
yeah.
And then yeah, go ahead.
And I was just gonna say, I agree that with the Coalescence Mirage, I definitely also prefer this over Coalescence. If you think about it, even if they do pop the Coalescence Mirage, it's only gaining you one resource that you would have paid to cast to pay for the footsteps and then cast the blue aura if you have it anyways. And then you also get to attack with it, which is relevant if it's like a shimmers. But otherwise, it's kind of an underwhelming pop effect, and Enigma is just one extra damage every single time. So
Yeah,
I like it a lot.
the only matchup I'm really liking Coalescence Mirage is in the mirror, in a particularly dominant Prism meta where people are bringing poppers.
Okay.
Locally here in Northern Virginia, Maryland, DC mall area, we have a pretty heavy Prism presence. A lot of really
Okay.
good Prism players, and so in that meta where people know and are expecting Prism, Coalescence Mirage is fine, particularly in the mirror because you're trying to build that board state. But
Gotcha.
when people aren't gunning for Prism, it's not as good. So that's
Yeah.
my 2 more cents on Coalescence Mirage.
Makes a lot of sense.
Alrighty, and then two of the Spices cards. Well, four of the Spices cards. So Art of War. This card is I think the most controversial card in the deck when
Yeah.
talking with other prisms. So I was sold on this card by Jody, who's on another team, Team Intrinsic, uh, at like 12:30 the night before the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
I was sitting down in the lobby at Harmony Suites, and we were just talking about it, and he convinced me the flexibility of this card is enough to be run, and it particularly is good in the aggro matchup against
Hmm.
Chane. It's a little clunky into Starvo, but it is flexible enough that you can get over the clunkiness of the card,
Yeah.
particularly in the tunic list. Like I would never run this in the vestige list. It is only really valuable on the tunic turn. Use the tunic um, and get it for free. Sometimes you may have to cycle it out of your hand in order to build your hand just like you would with like a halo sometimes, where you're like,
Mm.
like I have this awkward hand, I'm gonna, activate Halo, uh, sack it, put a card in Soul, draw a card. It kind of has a similar feel to it when it's bad, but when it's good or above average, it is really good.
Yeah.
So the modes on this card, it most of the time in the aggro matchup is wait for Tunic, arsenal it, play it out, have a +1 on 2 to 3 attacks, and have a 5 card hand is
Yeah.
is when it's like really good. Well, is when it's average. When it's really good is when it's later game and you're coming in with an erudition for 5. They've already used up most of their armor. They don't have a popper. They go with an armor block for 2, maybe on a like maybe two a 1-and-1 across 2 equipment and a 3 block from hand, and
Yeah.
then this is your yellow lunging press for 1. Um, and that is very very good. So that's a great mode on the card. Um, yeah, like the extra yellow, it just is very flexible in that regard. So those are the times I found it to work best.
Yeah. Did you
Um,
ever use the +1/+1 and defend from Arsenal mode against Starvo?
Not against Starvo. I actually used it in a Prism Mirror to block out an Erudition with 1 card and a shield. I had
Nice.
already blocked out an Erudition with the Iron Hide and a card, and
Yeah.
they came in with another Erudition, and I was able to block it out with a Triumph for 4 and a shield. So
Yeah.
the defensive mode is good.
Yeah, for
Not
sure.
as not as used as much, but is good.
Yeah, so in the aggro matchups, it's definitely another high risk card. It's just another non blocker if they're ever coming in with like an ultra relevant on hit effect. But worst case scenario, you cycle one of your attacks out and choose +1/+1, and there's a pretty good chance you're going to draw into another blocker. And I think we saw a lot of people, a lot of Prism players toying around with the idea of the attack reactions and the instant speed shenanigans. I know Dozer was running blue pummels and lunging press. I think Oliver from the OKNY podcast was running yellow pummels. And this is just kind of what you settled on with the Art of War. I think it's a good in between. It's castable off of Tunic, which in my opinion is like probably the biggest thing going for it, to be honest. The
Yep.
+1/+1 to multiple attacks is very relevant if your hand is full, and the filtering to get extra cards is also huge. So, as far as the attack reaction and kind of instant speed department goes, I think Art of War is a really good choice when you're in a race.
I think so too. Um, there were a couple times it was a little awkward against Starvo, but between the 14 rounds, I maybe only got punished maybe once out of 14 rounds running it, or one time that I was like, this didn't really
Yeah.
work out very well at all.
Yeah.
So that's Art of War in the list.
Yeah.
Then obviously library. I decided to get cold foil signed.
Awesome.
And so it was funny when I got this out next to my dull cap. They were like, "What the hell?" And the extended tunic, they're like, "What's going on here?" Like, it was really funny. I enjoyed it. And this card is incredible. And it won me maybe three of my uh, 4 wins against Starvo. It's always been good into Guardian.
Yeah.
It did lose me one game against Guardian on an exact lethal turn,
Mm.
because I could block 3 of the hammer and not 4. So if this was any other blocking card in my deck, or if it was a card that pitched, I could have used my Iron Hides to block out a hammer.
Yeah.
But like so that was the one time out of 14 rounds I got punished with it. If you draw it early, it's incredible. If you draw it late against aggro, it's bad. It only
Mm.
comes out against Prism, and I didn't see any Reinars, but it would come out against Reinar as well.
Yeah.
Just because it's 2 intimidate triggers on the stick for him, so
Mhm.
that's not so great. Um, but yeah, I run it even in a chain because if you get it early, it is great on the aggressive plan. So most of the time in Starvo, I wasn't pitching defensively. I was taking a hit, and I was pitching 2 yellows to play a yellow aura on my turn, and then whatever else I had in my hand. And it was just incredible. Most games I drew 4 to 5 cards against Starvo with this. There was one game I drew like 8 cards. It's nuts.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, my opponent wasn't very happy.
Yeah,
um,
it's that I'll definitely look forward to the comment section on this. It's also one of the more debated topics in Prism these days. But I think your description was really useful as far as reasons for bringing it in.
it's 100% luxury card, very high
Hmm.
rolly, high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
Um, back ProQuest season, I wasn't running it. Back RTN season, I was, but I told myself I would only run it if I had Sync Below in my 80, and here I am running it without Sync Below. So
Yeah.
it just is a drug I can't quite get away from.
Respect.
Eh,
If you
Yeah.
didn't run it, do you have a quick idea of what card you'd replace it with?
If I did not run library, it would be a red immovable.
Yep, that checks out. Makes sense.
Yep. Just for the Starvo matchup and maybe Ice
Yeah.
Lexi.
Yeah.
Then so I'm a little bit weird, not in that I like Miraging Metamorph. It is a very good card we as illusionist players got from Everfest. It just is so like it usually just reads 7 damage
Yeah.
for 1 because they will not block this. They do not want to pop it unless they absolutely have to.
Hmm.
Um, uh, like most times my opponents won't call the bluff if I don't have the blue pitch for the instant speed yellow aura. They just take it because
Yeah.
that threat is just incredible. Like the board presence you get is too good for them to ignore. So it's 1 for 7.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and then Red War Tune. I'm in love with this card. I maybe got punished a little bit because I like it too much. Like having 6 1 cost 7 attacks in the deck is great. And the reason I say getting punished is with Prism, you obviously want your ratios to be heavily yellow skewed.
Yeah.
I just like the ability to have the threat of 1 for 7 off of Tunic too much
Hmm.
to not run it in addition to Miraging. So in some matchups, I was running 63 cards where my 3 extra cards were Red War Tune just because I like it so much. So
Gotcha.
that's a me thing, probably not optimal, but I just yeah, it's too good to be running Tunic with 6 red 1/7s. So
For sure.
so that is the core of the deck. Now we're gonna get onto some more unique sideboard choices. So firstly, the Prism package. 3 Celestial Cataclysms and 2 Command and Conquers. I think
Mhm.
5 is the least amount of poppers you will want in the meta. And I just feel so comfortable in the Prism Mirror, not to toot my own horn. I did lose to 1 Prism in round 10. That was the only mirror I lost all weekend, and it was because I drew 3 no yellow hands back to back to back
Mm.
on like starting turn 3, and I came back and I got him to 8, but unfortunately it was like 32 to like 10, and I
Wow.
ground it back to 8-1, and just unfortunately couldn't get there. He drew too hot with heralds,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think 5 is as little and as you want, and 9 is probably fine. Being 3, and 3 yellow raging onslaughts. That's another card you can run in the Enigma Chimera slot
Okay.
if you plan on seeing a lot of Prism.
Yeah.
So as far as like 2 CNC, if you want 6, I'd say you could take out a Phantasmaclasm. But I like the Phantasmaclasm too much, so I'm running
Hmm.
2 and 3 poppers. Now for the aggro decks, Chain, Starvo or Chain, uh, let's see, Chain, Katsu, Briar. I'm running 3 Phantasmaclasm and 2 Fractal Replication. Just because Fractal is amazing, and I've been in love with Phantasmaclasm since Monarch first. Um, Phantasmaclasm is a really high rolly card. I like it, especially in these decks when people aren't running as many poppers, because if you catch
Yeah.
them, you get that popper, and you're just off to the races. Sometimes, and unfortunately, you will draw them into the popper, but the odds of that happening are very low, in my
Right.
opinion. It didn't happen to me. Like, it has happened to me before. It feels bad, but um, it's whatever. It's just part of running the card. It's very useful because you can mess people's hands up, get rid of their blue when they need the blue. You can get rid of the second non-attack. You can get rid of a key attack. You can get rid of a channel mount heroic. Just like there's always argument. Yes, you can draw them into it, but I rather would have the proactive game plan than the reactive game plan when on
Yeah.
the aggressive side of the deck. So I like the disruption aspect of the card.
Yeah. Decks are built with so much balance in them that throwing off like one of their ratios, like Chain is a really good example. Chain hand wants like one blue, at least a non-attack and probably an attack. And sometimes they have an extra duplicate of one of those things. So if they have one blue, 2 attacks, and a non-attack, if you either take that non-attack or the blue, and they don't draw into exactly that card, their hand is actually like nerfed by a lot. So aside from the whole drawing into a popper thing, nerfing your opponent's hand and having knowledge of what's going to ruin their hand really helps a lot, and it makes Phantasmaclasm like a huge card in my opinion.
Yeah, and the knowledge of knowing what's in their hand and what to
Yeah.
expect. 3 out of 4 cards is pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a very high variance card. If you weren't running this card, things you could run in its place: 3 red, uh, 3 red Heralds of Protection.
Mm.
I think talking with Dozer, we had a long conversation about this card, and I fall in the pro Phantasmaclasm camp, and he falls in the against. And in his assessment, I think he's right that the replacement to this would be red protections
Mm.
uh, in aggro. Although, if you're doing that, then most likely you're probably not running fractals, because
Right.
you want to have enough cards that don't go to soul when they hit, to be able to run this card.
Yeah, so
So
you could even get a little spicy and run red um
Enigma
Enigma
Chimera, that was going to
Chimera.
be the other card I was going to say.
Yeah.
Red protections or red Enigma Chimeras. Yep.
Yeah.
Although the problem with those 2 cards are that they don't pay for themselves if you draw duplicates, right? So
Hmm.
that's where the yellow Enigma Chimera is huge. You could bump up to 3 yellow Enigma Chimera if you want, and that would be fine as well.
Definitely.
And also, so this card was such gas in my 3 Prism mirrors. like I did lose because like the one prism with the 3 no yellow hands, because it was like miraging fractal and a blue aura, and I wanted to set up
Oh
that
yeah.
turn. So I like Arsenal one was blocking with the blue, took some damage, drew another blue, I was like, ah. So like it kind of, there was that one time where I got punished because of it, but like these attack auras for 0, they do insane things on the offense. Against Chane, normally what will happen is you'll get your first erudition blocked out perfectly or with a husk, and you'll follow up with a fractal on the Chane, and then they cry. Against Prism, they full block any of your heralds, and heaven forbid they block with one of their own eruditions. And then
Yeah.
you come in with this on the end of the chain, it's going to be nuts. I think the best that happened for me over the weekend with this card was I attacked with a yellow protection. They blocked with a red protection and some other card, and then I played this, and it came in for 7. Go again on hit, go to soul, create 2 spectral shields
Yeah.
because it gets both of the spectral shield triggers from both of the protection. Um, just incredible card. Or I guess like obviously blocking or attacking with erudition, they block it out, and then I come in with this. Like those were both like
Yeah.
common things. Um,
Yeah, it's a pretty high
or
skill cap card. I think it requires
yeah,
setup and it requires knowing how to play around it. And like we were talking about earlier, it requires knowing your opponent's tendencies. Because if they let your Light Heralds hit often, you really need to save the Fractal until you draw your Phantasmaclasm or your Enigma Chimera. But if you
yep,
have an opponent that like really for some reason is valuing the Light Heralds and full block it, they don't pop it, they just full block it, you can actually catch them with just a Light Herald into a Fractal Replication. So pay attention to that. Make your decisions based on what your opponents do. But like worst case scenario, just save the fractal until you draw the Phantasmaclasm. There's a really high chance that they're not going to be able to pop the Phantasmaclasm, and then fractal. So you have the best hand is yellow, tunic counter up, Phantasmaclasm for 9, and then fractal for 9. 3 cards
yeah,
for 18 damage is very very nice.
yep, yep. That does happen. And it
Yeah.
feels really good.
Yeah.
So that's Fractal. I don't run 3. 3's a little heavy because again,
Mhm.
it can be clunky. It can be a little awkward. If I was running more generic illusionist cards, 3 would be fine. But with
Sure.
my ratios, 2 was the right number for me.
Gotcha.
And then I know I've probably said this multiple times while we've been talking, but Red Prismatic Shield is like if not my favorite illusionist card. This
Okay.
card is the synergistic card for the class. With the like back in RTN season all the way to today. I know it fell out of favor for a little bit with the Starvo meta. However, like it is just so good into Guardian. It comes out against the aggro decks. I leave only 1 in for the mirror, but I run a full set of 3 against Starvo just because it's a high skill cap card.
Yeah.
It represents 6 life on 3 cards, and it gets amplified if you come with the synergy based off of if you have a Merciful Retribution or if you have an Ode to Wrath. So those cards compound the value of this card by a lot. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, its floor is I play this at instant speed and I soak damage and they pop. Its its average case is I allow myself to take some damage, which as Prism that is normally the line of play you want to do.
Mhm.
And at instant speed after damage or in response to an on-hit effect like a crippling crush, I play this out. And then I have 3 Kodachis that also are going to save me 3 life.
Yeah.
And in best case, you're going to play this out and you're going to be doing 2 damage per each card. And then you're going to be dealing an additional 2 damage, like with an Ode to Wrath.
Yeah.
And if you have a Merciful, it's going to prevent you 3 damage and deal 3 Arcane. And if
Yeah.
you have both of those out, then it's like just insane craziness. Yeah, so I love Red Prismatic Shield. Hopefully Dromai is going to be able to use this card as well because it's just It's
It
so
is
good.
a red, and
Yeah.
supposedly they're going to be caring about reds. So,
Yep.
and,
So I'm hoping that the Everfest tools and Red Prismatic Shield get to go into that deck as well.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I think this was a really good in-depth view of like all the card decisions. I have to say, finding the fractal replication and stuff, I think some people went for that. Some people went for full fatigue against Chain, but I think the aggro also just bolsters your gameplay into the mirror and into other aggro decks. But did you have any doubts about aggro? Did you ever kind of want to try the impenetrable belief builds and just block out the chain, or what made you make that decision?
So I had them with me in New Jersey, the
Hmm.
impenetrable belief blues. I just didn't have any testing on that build into them, and uh, Jody sold me on this aggro plan with Art of War, and it paid off. So in the Pro Tour, I played against two chains and beat them both, and then in side events, I played against two more chains and beat them as well. So I know this deck has legs
Yeah.
into aggro. Doesn't mean that it's I don't I wouldn't say I know the exact percentages, but I had really great results with it. I would say the only card, like if you don't like this plan, I did kind of miss red unmovables against Starvo.
Hmm. Yeah.
Three of my five losses were against Starvo. The games that I did lose were very close. And there's a point to be made with red unmovable being able to block some of their huge attacks. But like, are you like sacrificing too much momentum on your turn, building board state against them? If they're playing a less aggressive list, if they're playing a more controlling list, I think saving as much of your life early as possible is pretty good against
Yeah.
them. So like forcing them to use some of their attacks against your 1 for 7s, and then stopping some of their big attacks with your red immovables, and then being able to grind out with the Aura plan. That's how I was able to win a lot of times during the ProQuest season because I was on red immovable. So. Uh, Three Prismatic Shield Red was almost enough in most cases with the three Soul Shields. But yeah, I'm not quite sold one way or the other yet. I may during this ProQuest season be back on some red, at least two.
Yeah. And just like every deck in this game, there might not always be like a strictly correct or incorrect decision. It's just a matter of if you know your deck is a certain way and you play to that. So if you know you have unmovables in your deck, you're going to focus more on setting up spectral shield presence, in my opinion, and protecting the spectral shields and getting the pings in. But if you're not
Yep.
running the unmovables, you need to be pressuring them a little bit more and focusing more on the spectra auras, and forcing them to lose turns by hammering your auras. So it's just a matter of knowing what's in your deck. If you don't want to run the unmovables, play a certain way. If you want to run the immovables, you can take advantage of that and play towards that as an out. So
Yep. And if you're running red immovable, you're probably running a higher blue count, and you're
yeah,
also probably running Arclight Sentinel. So
definitely.
um, yeah, that would be, you wouldn't want to run either of those cards on 18 blues. Or in my aggro matchups, I was usually sideboarding out four blue auras, usually two haze and two shimmers of silver,
Yeah,
lowering my blue count, increasing my red and yellow counts, and um, yeah, so that's one point with the deck in
awesome.
the chain matchups.
Well, congrats again on your 50th place finish at Pro Tour. That's so awesome. I mean, there was representation from like countries all over the world, New Zealand, Australia, I think tons of Polish people there and other European countries. And you ran really far and really deep with Prism. You've been playing Prism for a while. And also, congrats again on joining our team. We're super excited to have you. And we'll look forward to bringing you on for some more videos and practicing with you. So thanks
Thanks,
again.
man.
All right. Remember, everyone, to like and subscribe and keep an eye out for more videos. And we'll see you next time.